Genesis chapter 10, beginning at verse 1, and we will read through to 11, verse 9. Please read along with me. Not out loud, though, but feel free to say it out loud. Then we can all say them. Anyway, I'll stop with the dad jokes. All right. Okay, this is the account. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togmar. The sons of Javan, Elijah, Tarshish, the Kittites, and the Rodanites. From these the maritime people spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Septica. The sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first centers of his kingdom were in Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth Ir, Calah, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Calah, which is the great city. Egypt was the father of the Ludites, Anamites, Lehabites, Naphtalites, Pathrosites, Catholites, from whom the Philistines came, and the Caphratites. Canaan was the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Aradavites, Semarites, and Hamathites. Later, the Canaanite clans scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon towards Gerar as far as Gaza, and then towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zoebim, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans and languages, in their territories and nations. Sons who were also born Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshech. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah was the father of Eber. The two sons were born to Eber. One was named Peleg, because of his time the earth was divided. His brother was named Joktan. Joktan was the father of Almadad, Shelith, Harzmath, Jerah, Hadaram, Udal, Dirkla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The region where they lived stretched from Mesha towards Sephar in the eastern hill country. These are the sons of Shem by their clans and languages, in their territories and nations. These are the clans of Noah's sons according to their lines of descent within their nations. From these the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If, as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. This is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. This chapter 10, beginning at verse 1, and we will read through to 11, verse 9. Please read along with me. Not out loud, though, but feel free to say it out loud. Then we can all say them anyway. I'll stop with the dad jokes. All right. Okay, this is the account. This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togmar. The sons of Javan, Elijah, Tarshish, the Kittites, and the Rodanites. From these the maritime people spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Ramah, and Septica. The sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan. Cush was the father of Nimrod, who became a mighty warrior on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That is why it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The first centers of his kingdom were in Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh, in Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth Ir, Calah, and Rezin, which is between Nineveh and Calah, which is the great city. Egypt was the father of the Ludites, Anamites, Lehabites, Naphtalites, Pathrosites, Cathalites, from whom the Philistines came, and the Caphratites. Canaan was the father of Sidon, his firstborn, and the Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Archites, Sinites, Ardavites, Semarites, and Hamathites. Later, the Canaanite clans scattered, and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon towards Gerar as far as Gaza, and then towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zoibim, as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans and languages, in their territories and nations. Sons who were also born Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshech. Arphaxad was the father of Shelah, and Shelah was the father of Eber. The two sons were born to Eber. One was named Peleg, because of his time the earth was divided. His brother was named Joktan. Joktan was the father of Almadad, Shelith, Harazmath, Jerah, Hadaram, Udal, Dirkla, Obal, Abimael, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The region where they lived stretched from Mesha towards Sephar in the eastern hill country. These are the sons of Shem by their clans and languages, in the territories and nations. These are the clans of Noah's sons according to their lines of descent, within their nations. From these the nations spread out over the earth after the flood. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If, as one people, speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. This is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth.
Well done. Very impressive. If you listened to all of that and you wondered, what is the theme of that particular passage? Well, I put it to you that the theme is airports, and specifically the international arrivals area of airports. I have 3 reasons for this, and I'm going to test the people who are here this morning. I'm not really. The first reason is that really this passage is about the origin of nations, or you might say the arrival of nations, hence international arrivals. It's about the spread and division of people into the various groups and nations that they were found in the ancient world. The second reason I think this reminds me of airports is that it's also about languages. And when I think of the international arrivals section of an airport, I think of people coming from all over with different languages, different accents, and that kind of aesthetic idea of the bustle of different languages all running up against each other. I think you get that in this passage. The third reason is that Glen likes to talk about landing planes. When you do a sermon, you've got to land the plane. And with this passage, I have no idea how to land the plane. I'm not sure what the real conclusion from this is. I've got a fourth reason just for you tonight. The fourth of my 3 reasons is that airports have elevators. Bear with me on this. Yes, airports do have elevators. This is kind of a restatement of what I was thinking about with point 3. In the software industry, amongst Silicon Valley types, when you're developing a new product, they like to talk about the elevator pitch. The idea of it is, if someone gets into the elevator with you, then by the time the elevator door opens again, you should be able to have convinced them, have first explained to them what your product is, and then convinced them that it's a product that needs to be made and needs to be funded. I do not think that there is an elevator pitch version of this passage. There is so much in there, and yet I'm not sure what to draw out of it in the end. So instead, I want to give you a bit of the context of this passage and try and work through it. And when we look at the context within the book of Genesis, there's 2 major sections in the book of Genesis, and they're called the primeval history and the ancestral history. The primeval history, the word primeval comes from prime is first, and the word avum, for evil, is age. So it's the first age. And it's all of the things that happen in the early part of Genesis, basically up to this point. The creation, the fall, the flood. And these are stories that are not just about Israel. They're common to Israel and to their neighbours in the ancient world. And the cultures around them had their own versions of these stories. We find there's parallel texts where the same stories are told from the perspective of a slightly different culture. And the thing that's particularly unique about the Genesis telling of these stories is their understanding of what the nature of God is and what the character of God is. The rest of Genesis is broadly categorized as the ancestral history. Basically, straight after this, we get introduced to Abram, who becomes Abraham, and he is the father of the nation of Israel. So from that point, you get much more directly into Israel-specific history. So there's really these two kinds of history which have been passed down in different ways over different lengths of time, and they've been combined together into a cohesive whole in the book of Genesis. You may not like this terminology, but I found it helpful, so I'm going to put it to you. The book of Genesis starts with historicized mythology and moves to mythologized history. I found that a helpful kind of framing of the whole book. So there it is. The passage tonight is really sandwiched right in the middle. We're at the inflection point of the primeval history and the ancestral history. And there's quite a lot to get through because you start off just after the flood with essentially one family. And by the time you get to Abraham, there's an assumption that there are various nations around. God says to Abraham right at the start of chapter 12, I'll make you into a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So we've got a bit of ground to cover. They've got a bit of ground to cover. There's the two sections of the reading that we've just done, the Table of Nations and the Tower of Babel. They're essentially they're complementary ways of covering that ground. That they're not really one after the other, because in this Table of Nations, we've got description of variety of language. And straight away, when you get to chapter 11, the whole world had one language and a common speech. So these things they're happening in parallel, and they complement each other to kind of understand what went on. I'm going to look first at the Table of Nations. And this is really, it's a kind of a genealogy. You look at the long list of names, and we get these long lists of names, but typically a genealogy is a straight line. You start with someone a very long time ago who was important, and you have someone fairly recently who is important, and it's about connecting the dots. You have a father, son, father, son, father, son, straight line. Here we go. We've proved that this man is directly descended from this man. But the Table of Nations isn't like that at all. It's really a family tree. And if we look at the overall structure, it's quite a broad family tree. It spreads out very rapidly in just a few generations. And that's really all I want you to take from this picture. You don't have to read any of those names to kind of understand that, yeah, it's about spread, and it's about the relations between the different sections of the tree rather than, yeah, being establishing a particular line of descent. Now you've got Noah at the top, and the next three, you've got Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And every time we read about Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they're listed in that order: Shem, Ham, Japheth. And the interesting thing to me about that is that that's not the order of how old they are. In the passage last week, we were told that Ham was the youngest son. Always listed second, but he's the youngest son. And then in the passage a bit later on, you get to verse 21. It says, Shem, whose older brother was Japheth. Now there's a footnote down the bottom which says possibly Shem, the older brother of Japheth. But if we go with the version they've gone with in the text, it's Japheth and then Shem and then Ham. So they're all out of place, basically. That's weird to me as one of four sons. I couldn't imagine writing a family history and listing them in a different order all the time. Just doesn't seem right. But the reasoning, I think, is that they're listed in some sort of order of significance. So Shem, being the direct ancestor of Abraham, they consider him the most important of the descendants of Noah, and so he gets in first. Ham, he's kind of the antagonist in the story. So he gets put in second, and Japheth is the other brother. He gets in third. And we expand them then in reverse order, just to really confuse you. So the first section of the Table of Nations is all about the sons of Japheth. Now, again, most of these names aren't particularly important to remember unless you're looking for ideas for your next kid. But I want to pick out, in particular, the sons of Javan or whatever. There's four listed here. And I want you to notice that the first is Elisha, which is a good, solid biblical name. The second is Tarshish. Now, it's not clear to me whether that's the name of an individual, but it is certainly the name of a prominent city in the ancient world. And the next two, the Kittites and the Rodanites. Did I do that? Nope. All right. The Kittites and the Rodanites are not, I don't think that's the name of a particular son. Possibly he was called Kit or Rodan or something, but what we take out of that is these names, they don't just correspond to particular individuals, but they refer to groups of people. Specifically, it's groups of people or nations that were known to the ancient Israelites, and it's relating them together. So when we look at verse 5, it says, the maritime peoples spread out into their territories by their clans within their nations, each with its own language. And this idea of its territories, its clans, its nations its languages is repeated after each of the expansions in this passage. In the case of the sons of Japheth, people have made various attempts to map all of these names to known groups in the ancient world that we know from the Bible and from other texts. And what you find when you map all of these names onto a map of the ancient world, the sons of Japheth were really sort of north and northwest of ancient Israel. So up through Lebanon, Syria, across modern Turkey and Greece. All of the sons of Japheth are from basically this region. And it makes sense of the fact that they're described as the maritime peoples, because you can see there's a lot of coastline, there's a lot of islands. Boats would have been a big part of their lives. We move on to the sons of Ham. Again, you're going to see pretty clearly we've got some geographical names. So Egypt is an obvious one. Canaan, the land of Canaan, becomes the land of Israel. And we've already seen a bit of a precursor to that last week with Canaan being cursed by Noah. So the people of Canaan had this curse put on them, and it ended up being their land that Israel took over. And you look at the other names in this list, if we look at it on a map, you've got Egypt here, down on the Nile. Cush, the land of Cush is down around the Red Sea. Canaan, as we said, is up in Israel. And Put is across basically the Mediterranean coast of modern Egypt. So that, Ham seems to be generally to the south and southwest of Israel. Now, the exception to this is Nimrod. Now, my first association with the name or the word Nimrod is from Looney Tunes, where it's used in the sense of, you're such a Nimrod, right? And I always took that to mean, as a child, you're a dimwit, you're a nitwit, you're a Nimrod. It's just a kind of a fun name to call your brothers or your mates if they're being a bit silly. But in fact, the insult was always directed at Elmer Fudd. And it's dripping with sarcasm. A mighty hunter before the Lord. Does that sound like Elmer Fudd? I think, yeah. Anyway, there was a literary reference there that I wasn't getting, and you can appreciate it the next time you watch Elmer Fudd. Nimrod is listed as a king, essentially, and the centres of his kingdom are in Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar. Now, the plains of Shinar you might recognise from the Tower of Babylon story. Babylon is right around modern Baghdad, and generally these cities are up through this region, up through here, up from the Persian Gulf. Who exactly Nimrod was in terms of history outside of the Bible is heavily debated. There are a lot of candidates, and there doesn't seem to be a clear winner. It's not really clear, even from this account, whether Nimrod was considered a goodie or a baddie. He's a mighty hunter before the Lord. And, that could mean he impressed the Lord. It could mean he's in the face of the Lord, antagonizing the Lord. But I think the thing to recognize is that he's described in relation to the Lord, and it is the proper name of the God of Israel, the Lord in capitals in our Bible. So the interesting thing about that is, as a king in the ancient world, you were often considered to have some aspect of divinity about you. But Nimrod, despite being a mighty warrior, a mighty hunter, a king with a big kingdom, he's described before the Lord. He's described only in relation to the God of Israel. The final son that we're going to look at of Noah is Shem. And you won't be surprised, Shem had sons. Shem's sons also had sons. This word Shemites or Semites has survived into modern usage. You probably have heard the term anti-Semitism describing discrimination against people with Jewish heritage. In fact, in this context, in earlier usage of the word, it describes not just Jewish people, but also a whole range of people who are loosely related. So the Israelites, Peleg down here is the direct ancestor of Abraham. So this line up through here, you come down through Peleg, and a few generations later, you get to Abraham. It's interesting to me that right down here, you've got a long list of the sons of Joktan. And to me, this says there's a lot of people who they consider to be kind of cousins. They're not quite Israelites, but all of these people groups are closely related to them. Geographically speaking, we fill out the rest of the map. We've got Japheth up here, we've got Ham down here, and a little bit of Nimrod over here. Well, the sons of Shem are described as being in the eastern hill country. So if we look at all of this out here, where you head out east from ancient Israel into the hills, that's where they are. If we look again at the overall picture, the other thing that is kind of important to understand about this is that numbers can be really important in understanding the point of a genealogy, and this is no different. So if you add up all of these descendants of the named descendants of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, you come to 70 in our translation. There's some manuscripts have 72. In fact, I don't think it really matters because whether it's 70 or 72, because 7s and 12s in Hebrew symbology are really about, they describe completion or perfection. I think that's really interesting reflection. There's an idea here that even though this looks like quite a chaotic picture, with all these people spreading out all over the place, speaking different languages, different cultures, there's an implication that it's God's plan, it's God's order. And I think that's, an important thing to see there that's not immediately obvious. If we look at the historical context outside of what we get directly in the Bible, we're at a really interesting time and place in history. This region that's highlighted here in the pink, red, whatever it is known as the Fertile Crescent. Now, you can see it stretches kind of from Israel over here, over down towards the Persian Gulf through all of this river country. And it's really good farmland. At this moment in history, we're moving from the Stone Age into the Bronze Age. And this area, the Fertile Crescent, is referred to as being the earliest cradle of civilization. What that really means is people started domesticating animals, and then they started domesticating crops and farming them. And in an area like this, where the farming was good, that meant they had surplus food. And it meant that they could support people doing things other than food production. They could live much more densely together and pool their resources and build cities. It's the earliest place on Earth where we know that they built cities. What this meant initially was basically shared facilities. So they'd have granaries to store their crops, markets to sell them. And one of the things that popped up very early on is temples. So they'd get together on whatever day of the week they like to do that and worship in the temple. Now, if you're building a new city and you want to impress your neighbours and you want to impress your divinity of choice with your temple complex, then what you really need to do is build a tower. And not just any tower, not a clock tower or a bell tower. What you need is one of these. This is a ziggurat. It's just a good name as well. Now, a ziggurat is associated with a temple, but it's not exactly for worship. It's actually an invitation to your divinity of choice to come and join you for worship in your temple. A city was typically built on high ground. Your temple would be built at the highest point in your city, and then you'd build the tallest tower that you could. And the tower is, these ziggurats, they're basically a big staircase, right? But the staircase is not for people to go up. The staircase is for gods to come down. It's an invitation, it's a convenience, so that the gods can come down, visit your temple for worship and bless your city. Now, the interesting thing about the Tower of Babel is that this kind of worked. God did come down. God saw them building a city, and he came down to their tower to check it out. But he wasn't particularly thrilled with the direction they were taking. And it's not really clear from the passage what it was about what they were doing that he disagreed with. Was it because they were centralising, they weren't spreading and filling the earth as he'd ordered? Possibly. Was the tower not the kind of thing he had in mind for a temple? Was it a problem that they were trying to make a name for themselves? Was God indeed unimpressed at all? Or was he just redirecting them? Your energies would be better spent elsewhere. It's not totally clear from the passage. In fact, I find the details of the words quite baffling. God says, if as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other. I'm not sure. An interesting theory I did read is that it can be understood in light of the flood. If your tower is tall enough and it's built at the highest point for all around, it's a flood-resistant structure. There's an idea that if God changed his mind and he wanted to wipe us all out again, maybe what we really need to do is get an insurance policy. And for me, that calls to mind the words of Paul to the Galatians, where he says, do not be deceived, God cannot be mocked. You can't think you can find a loophole and get around God's judgment. The passage ends with a wordplay, and the wordplay very happily works just as well in English as it does in Hebrew. You see, that's why they call it Babylon. It's because you can't understand a word anyone's saying. And we know that Babylon did end up being this kind of multicultural mixing pot, the centre of empires where people came from all around, from all the different nations, and ended up mixing together in the same street. And if you were an ancient Israelite, you may well have walked down the street and not understood a thing that anyone said. Now, I'm going to end a little bit differently this morning because there's another association I have with the word Nimrod, the name Nimrod. From a little bit later in my adolescence, and that is as an album title. Now, if you're an aficionado of late 90s pop punk albums, you would know that Green Day put out an album called Nimrod. And the most popular song from this album, I was thinking about it, and the words they feel quite relevant, surprisingly. So if you think again about the idea that in the chaos of this world, there was God's order, I put it to you that you can read that into the words of this song. So I'm going to finish by reciting some lyrics, if I can remember them. You might recognise them. The song goes like this. It goes, another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist and directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end, it's right. I hope you have the time of your life. And we're going to sing that song now. No, we're not.
Thank you, Michael. You did land the plane. You said you weren't going to land the plane. You landed the plane. And I was going to actually say that not only did you land the plane at the end of the sermon there, I think you've actually landed the plane from the primeval period and prepared us. And then the plane has taxied around and the captain has said again, we're about to take off into the ancestral history. So I feel like you've done that in two ways for us tonight. So thank you very much.